Welcome to Truth and Liberty. Thank you for joining our daily live call-in broadcast, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to the issues, and you can call in and get your questions answered in real time. According to the Bible, it's the truth you know that sets you free. So call in today to get answers, information, and resources to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and the world. And now here's your host, Richard Harris.
Hello, everybody. This is Richard Harris. Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show. I am really excited about today's program. It is going to be super informative and educational for you, and so I'm really excited about that. We've got some great guests on the show today, but before I introduce them and go to that subject, go to the topic we've got lined up for you, I wanted to just spend a little bit of time at the outset of today's program to talk about the news and some current events. So as you all know, last night was the presidential debate, the first debate of this season between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And I'm sure most of our loyal Truth and Liberty fans watched the debate. It was a little bit like having some form of outpatient surgery or something. It was so uncomfortable watching these two gentlemen debate each other. And I happen to be a big Donald Trump fan in many ways. He, in his first presidential administration, he did so much good for this country. But, you know, as I said to my wife, Trump is not a good debater, is he? He's got his issues there. But, you know, there's no doubt in my mind that he came away as the clear winner of the debate. And, you know, the number one issue, I think, going into the debate, at least on everybody's mind, was how is Biden going to do? The man is getting really advanced in age. And, you know, Biden's fitness to be president of the United States. And from the moment he came out onto the stage, that issue went from being on top of everybody's mind to being no doubt the number one question. And, you know, he walked out really kind of slow, looked, trying to find where he pointed to the and then during the debate itself, you know, he was hoarse, he was mumbling a little bit. Twice, I think, he actually lost track of what he was saying and couldn't complete his narrative. He botched the description of the holding of Roe versus Wade, saying stuff that had nothing to do with the holding. And then, you know, at times he was like staring off into space. One commentator that afterwards I was listening to a joke said, you know, I think he blinked 3 times in an hour and a half. You know, and he was cranky and he was vitriolic. So it was a really, really bad night for Joe Biden. You know, Biden's answers, they had a lot of facts or so-called facts. Many of the facts were not actually true, but he was prepared with information in a way that was beyond what I expected. A lot of people speculate about whether he was on some kind of neurological enhancing medication, but he did it in a way that was often rambling, hard to understand. I don't know how many times he said the idea. So he would say, oh, the idea, and then sometimes wouldn't complete the thought. Now he did land a few punches. You know, he said that Trump had the morals of an alley cat. He pointed out that under Trump's administration, the national debt was increased to record levels. He kind of got Trump off track a little bit with his January 6th allegations. But, you know, blaming Trump for his economy, that didn't work. People know, they remember. Accusing Trump of handling COVID badly, that didn't work either. Everybody remembers. And it was Biden continued and ramped up on steroids everything Trump did, including the whole vaccine mandate fiasco, unconstitutional, everything. Biden had no defense to Trump's legitimate accusations about the immigration disaster, the illegal immigration disaster. And he also, you know, tried to use the worn-out allegations from 2020 about Trump being a friend of Putin and a friend of Kim Jong-il. And, you know, he went as far back as the Charlottesville incident to rehearse some of that old worn-out stuff. And I don't think people, hardcore Democrats, yeah, that was, nice for them to hear, but I don't think it persuaded anybody in the middle, really. But Trump, he hit Biden. It wasn't necessarily eloquent or with stats and data, which frustrates me, the lawyer. I wanted to come with the facts. But he hit Biden on Afghanistan effectively. He hit him on immigration. He hit him on late-term abortion. He hit him on the economy and on foreign affairs. And I thought all of those were pretty effective. And there were a couple of blows that he landed that were really good. When Biden didn't complete one of his sentences or mumbled through it, Trump said, I don't know what he was saying, and I don't think he knew what he was saying. I thought that was really effective. And then he called him, he said he's being paid by China. Factually, is that true or not? We know what he's talking about. And he called him a Manchurian candidate. And then they got into arguing about his golf game, which was really about his effectiveness to be president, about his physical fitness. And Trump said, you're not a 6 handicap. I've seen your golf swing. But then Trump said, but let's all be adults, right? Kind of funny, really. But then he also said, Trump said, I've been dealing with politicians my whole life as a businessman, and they all lie, but this guy takes it to a new level. I've never seen anybody lie like he lies. And then Trump was non-responsive on a couple questions. They had to bring him back, but Biden was too. Trump got defensive about January 6th, but he eventually got back on message. So overall, I think Trump came away as the clear winner. It was a little bit embarrassing for the country, honestly. It's like, can we not put forward 2 better nominees than these 2 guys? But you know what? We're electing a president based on more than his ability to be a championship debater. We're electing him based on policy. And there's no question when we look at what Donald Trump accomplished in his first administration and what he stands for, that he is much more closely aligned to biblical values and to conservative principles than Joe Biden. In fact, Joe Biden has surprised even liberals in how aggressively socialist, progressive, and Marxist he's been, fully embracing LGBTism, fully embracing progressive Marxism, fully embracing racism itself, reverse racism, and many other things, which I can't go into today. But Trump clearly was the winner, and I think all in all, that's got to be a good thing for America. And so we're looking forward to see how the rest of this campaign unfolds. The one thing that concerned me, the thing that concerned me the most, was Donald Trump seemed to pull back on the question of abortion. And he said he was in favor of the FDA approval of the abortion pill. That, folks, should concern every single one of us. And we need to get the message out loud and clear. That is not cool with us as conservative Christians. You're embracing medical abortion through the mail, the killing of innocent babies in the womb, and that will never, ever be okay. But overall, it was a good day for America, and I'm excited about that. Well, guys, we've got 2 other things in the news. Number one, the Supreme Court held in Fletcher versus U.S. today that one of the main claims used against January 6th defendants is not appropriate, and it's the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So that's a good thing. Check that out in the news. Hopefully, some Jan 6ers will get some relief from that illegal prosecution. The second thing is they held that the Chevron standard is unconstitutional, and they struck it down. Basically, what this means is that federal courts now must independently interpret the law and cannot defer to federal administrative agencies. Huge decision. Hard for lay people to really understand how big this is, but it's going to impact stuff like where Biden tries to reinterpret Title IX and force schools to embrace transgenderism. Things like the abortion pill, where the FDA says, yeah, we're going to disregard the law and do what we want here, and climate change legislation and stuff like that. So a big win for freedom, for the Constitution today. All right, without further ado, I wanted to introduce to you today our special guest. Going from the far right here today, I want to introduce to you Steve Schleiker. Now, Steve is currently serving as the clerk and recorder for El Paso County, Colorado, just down the mountain from us here up in Woodland Park. It's Colorado Springs. And the clerk and recorder in Colorado has the jurisdiction over elections, local elections, is responsible for administering those. And Steve he's in his first term as clerk and recorder, but he actually served 2 terms as the county assessor. So he's over the administration of taxes and property taxes, especially in property valuations. He's a United States Marine Corps veteran, right, Steve?
Yes, sir.
And we're very thankful to you for your service. Thank you for that as well. He won the Downtown Civil Servant Star Award and many other honors, so we're really glad to have Steve with us. Also want to introduce to you today Candice Stutzriem. I hope I said it right. We were joking beforehand about your guys' last names, but I think I got it close enough. So Candice is a longtime mom, but she also served in the United as a, I think you were an Air Force Public Affairs officer, so also a military veteran. And she's now a conservative activist here in this region. And I've invited both of these folks on the program today because there's something really important happening in Colorado that everybody needs to know about. And you might be like, well, Richard, why do you focus on Colorado so much? You know, you've got a whole country here. And it's because Colorado is the blueprint, folks. Back in 2008, millionaire, billionaire Colorado LGBT activists decided they were going to turn this state blue, and they did it. And now what happens here, it happens here first, and then it gets farmed out to the nation. So do you live in a blue state? Do you live in a purple state? Do you even live in a red state where people are trying to turn it purple and eventually blue? If you do, then you need to listen to what I'm talking about, what we're talking about today, because one of the most dangerous things that is on the ballot or trying to get on the ballot this year in the state of Colorado is they're trying to abolish the primary system for parties selecting candidates, and they're also trying to institute something called ranked choice voting. And Steve and Candice are here today to explain all of this to us and help us walk through this incredibly dangerous thing. And so I just want to begin as we get going by, let's first start, Steve and Candice, by telling folks, how do things work currently in Colorado? You know, back in 2020, when people were upset about voter fraud and stuff like that, the defendants of the Colorado system said, no, we've got the gold standard here. You remember that?
Absolutely.
Right. And they even said, let's move, you know, Atlanta, they just voted, to modify their system. So bad people in Georgia, we should move the All-Star game to Denver because they have the gold standard. Do you remember that? And they didn't like Coca-Cola and stuff. But if we've got the gold standard, why are they trying to change it? Well, first, let's talk about how things are right now. Steve, what's a primary election, first of all?
You know, absolutely. So, Richard, what a primary election is where a candidate will align with their party. And there's 3 different ways you can get onto the ballot here in the state of Colorado. One, you could either petition on, or you can go through your party's assembly process, or you could do a combination of both. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I've gone through the assembly process and I've also petitioned on as well, so I've done both. But when you sit there and go petition and also through the assembly process, is you have to garner the necessary signatures, which have to be certified by either the Secretary of State or my office, and then you also have to get 10% of the vote within the assembly. So if you actually get that, then you're on to the ballot. However, if you go through the assembly, you have to get 30% of the vote to move on. Or if you petition on, then you just bypass the whole entire assembly process. And we actually saw that in El Paso County, where we had a list of candidates running for particular races, where there were some races where there was 4 candidates where they petitioned on or they actually went through the assembly process. But there's 3 different ways to do that. That's how you get onto the primary ballot. And here in Colorado is we have an open primary, where a registered Republican receives the Republican primary ballot, a registered Democrat gets the Democratic primary ballot. However, the unaffiliated, which now make up 51% of total voters in El Paso County, they get both ballots. However, they can only choose one. And Richard, this is extremely confusing to a lot of voters. And the reason why is many of them will sit there and go ahead and vote, you know, different individuals on either ballot, but once they do that and they cast their ballots, their votes don't count. So they can only sit there and vote one ballot. So in the March 5th primary that we had for the presidential primary, we had over 2,000 voters whose vote did not count.
Wow. Because they cast both a Democrat and Republican ballot.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
which is horrible. And you can actually determine a race with that many votes.
Sure.
However, with our June 25th state primary, we had over 200. So we're making some inroads getting the word out there, but we still have individuals that are voting both ballots.
So a primary election is for the purpose of determining who's going to be on the general election ballot representing the parties. Is that basically right?
That is correct.
Okay. So you'll have a Republican primary and a Democrat primary. And then, Candice, in Colorado, who makes the general election ballot right now? So we've got an election this year, November. How do we know who's going to be on that ballot?
Well, it's whoever prevails in the primary race, which is what happened on Tuesday of this week.
But don't we also, though, allow third-party candidates on in some situations? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our unaffiliated and minor parties, they petition on. And so we do have individuals who are petitioning onto the ballot through unaffiliated, and they have to get 1,200 signatures. And those are 1,200 certified signatures. So, Richard, to ensure you get on the ballot as an unaffiliated, you have to get about 2,000 signatures, because individuals that will sign the petition will say, yeah, I'm a registered Republican. However, they're not. They're unaffiliated.
So tell me this, guys, and it doesn't matter who answers, but why do we need the primary election? Why is it important for parties to have a role in determining who gets on the ballot?
Well, to me, the primary experience is narrowing down. It's giving the voter an opportunity to choose their potential leadership in the marketplace of ideas. And that's why I prefer the assembly, the caucus and assembly, and the traditional method, although I'm not going to rule out the petition pathway either. But what's happening here is that you have an opportunity to meet the people that want to be your leadership. And they have to get up in front of you in a kind of daunting situation with thousands of people present at the assembly, and you get to hear what these people stand for. Mm-hmm. And they are battling mano a mano against the other guy or gal to vie for your vote. Mm-hmm. And I'm afraid that if we ever lost the assembly, caucus, and party system, we would no longer know who these people are.
Right. They
would be anonymous, really names only on a primary that's populated by all parties.
Is there anything, and we're going to talk about what's coming down the pike here.
Yeah.
But if the parties lost control of who goes on the ballot with their name ID, in other words, with the R or the D next to the name, if the parties lose control, what's to stop a really crafty progressive in a conservative district from changing her registration or his registration and saying, I'm actually a Republican? Would there be anything to stop that?
Not at all. To me, if I could piggyback off what Candice just alluded to, is one reason for the assembly and the caucus is you are being interviewed by thousands of individuals to see if you stand on the party platform.
That's right.
What does the party stand for? Do you agree with that platform, and would you support it? That would be completely gone. And Richard, we're seeing it now. We see individuals who are running under a particular R or D and not supporting that platform.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look then at what is being proposed here in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And first off, there's a businessman. His name is Ken Thiry. Okay, hopefully I said his name right.
Yep.
And he is leading the charge on several ballot initiatives to radically change how we handle elections in Colorado. So the first one, I think, is a proposal to abolish the assembly and caucus, right? Is under this idea, the only way you could get on the ballot in Colorado would be by petition. Tell me if I'm right or wrong on this.
I can address that one.
Okay.
Initially, Kent Thiry proposed almost 100 different initiatives, but they were narrowed down as the months progressed on toward the deadline in May. And we were uncertain which of these initiatives were going to be chosen. eliminating the caucus and assembly system in favor of petition on was a popular theme that ran through many of these initiatives. But in the end, he just chose Proposition 310. Okay. It does not directly eliminate the parties or insist on petition on only. But what it does do is it creates what we call, in our side, the jungle primary.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a jungle primary is where there's one primary ballot, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And everybody's on the same ballot, right?
Right.
Okay, so we know then that there is a petition that's being circulated right now for signature in Colorado to put on the ballot a jungle primary system. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. So in this system, how in the world does that work? Why do you even have a primary if everybody's on the same ballot?
You know, and Richard, you're absolutely right. One of which is going to create a ton of voter confusion. Mm-hmm. I see it today as the El Paso County Clerk and Recorder, and an example I share with folks is a coordinated election. This is where voters are voting on school board members. And you can have a number of different school board members, for example, 5 different individuals running for at-large or for a different district. However, many of the voters have no idea who these individuals are. They will sit there and undervote the ballot. Mm-hmm. And what happens then is, you know, they're just sitting there going, they vote one person, this is who I want to go in. And I see a lot of that. But with this jungle primary that Candice is alluding to, is if you don't vote for a particular number of individuals on that ballot, then your vote does not count.
Okay, well let's dial back, because we gotta explain to people yep. what this looks like and, yep. and what's being proposed here. So let me just go back, Candice. I was under the impression that they were trying to abolish the caucus and assembly. So if that's actually not going to happen, what role will caucus and assembly have under what they're proposing?
I'm glad you asked that question, because even if they don't outright abolish the caucus and assembly system, it's so marginalizing the effectiveness. As the statutes are written now, an individual candidate can, if they're fortunate enough to place first, they become what's called the top line candidate. So on the ballots as we run them right now, they would be the top choice on the ballot. And that really matters, as Steve would know, because a lot of people, based on name recognition, can only remember one name. This will go away in the jungle primary, because the single ballot will have all parties, and the number is not going to be rank ordered according to preference, say the approval by the party system. I think we all know now that we may have people in our party that may not be heavily involved like we are with all the political machinations, but they still do respect who the party has chosen for and who they have acknowledged. And now that distinction will be gone.
Well, so under this new system that Mr. Theory is pushing, will there be a person on the primary ballot people can look at and say, this is the party nominee? Will we know who that person is from the ballot alone?
They still might retain that, the ability for the party to acknowledge who they have recommended, but there isn't a rank order. As we work right now, several party members can get on the primary ballot. That's the whole purpose. We're trying to narrow down to our best candidate to go on to the primary. Now, just so I don't want to confuse you, the ranked choice voting does not occur at the primary level.
Yeah.
This comes in at the general.
Yep. Well, let's talk about that later, because that's confusing enough.
Yes.
Under this system, though, a jungle primary, everybody goes on one ballot. There's no longer a Democrat or Republican ballot.
Correct.
And so there has to be some way to send more than one person to the general election. So what are they going to do? What is that?
The initiatives. Initiative 310, which is the initiative that Kent Theory has chosen to go the distance with, narrows this down to what's called a Final Four state.
Okay.
So the primary race narrows down each race to the Final Four candidates. Now, what could very likely happen...
Okay, stop for just a second.
Sure.
Make sure people understand what you're saying. That if this goes through, we're going to see 4 candidates go from the primary to the general.
Correct.
Not 2. There's not going to be a winner of the primary. There'll be 4 people going forward. Okay.
And then it
Go
gets
ahead.
more dramatic from there. But what could often happen is that these 4 candidates could often be all from one single party.
Right,
And we
because everybody's on the same
yes,
ballot.
we saw that happen in Alaska, where we had, if I can give that example, of Sarah Palin's race for their only House representative. 2 Republicans progressed on to the general election ballot. 2 of them were Republicans. There was a Democrat, and I really don't know who the 4th one was because they didn't really play heavily in this. But with the ranked choice voting, we'll explain that later, they ended up electing the first Democrat to the House of Representatives in the history of Alaska.
So if everybody's on one ballot, Steve, in the primary election, how many people can be on the ballot? You could have 20 people on one ballot, right?
That's right.
Like, can you imagine governor or even Congress? I mean, down in El Paso County, we just had the primary for Congress. You could have 50 people.
That's right.
Both Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliateds, and dog catchers, all on one ballot. And yet this law would say the top 4 go forward. Okay. What top 4?
Well,
the top 4 vote getters?
It's not just that all the cats and dogs are on one ballot. It's all the cats and dogs can vote on it as well.
Okay,
in other words, now we're in an open primary since 107 and 108 went through in 2016. This takes it one step further. It's not just open to unaffiliated, but this is Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated. Basically, any registered voter has an opportunity to vote off this miles-long primary ballot.
Okay, so if they're sending 4 people onto the general from the jungle primary, how do they determine which 4? What's the idea?
Basically what happens is it's the 4 top vote getters that will sit there, and what happens is they will sit there and redistribute.
Is that ranked choice voting?
That's ranked choice voting.
So that's in the general though, right?
Yeah, that's the general.
Okay. Not yet,
Excuse me. But what it is the top 4 vote getters.
Well, hey, look, I don't mean to interrupt you guys, but this illustrates a point. A fundamental philosophical problem here. Isn't it one vote? You cast one vote in this jungle primary, and the top 4 vote getters move on, right?
Because it is.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
tell me, is that
correct.
true?
Because it's plurality.
So when we get to the general, though, in November, they switch it up. It's no longer one vote cast by one person.
Right.
That's correct.
It's 4 votes cast by each person, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, but I just wanted to make that point so people understand how bizarre this new system they're proposing is.
Exactly.
Now, when we're talking about the jungle primary, what are the problems with a jungle primary? Just forget about ranked choice voting for a second. Let's talk about just a jungle primary. I know California has it, and it's a one-party state out there, solid Democrat. You got some Republicans in the legislature, but generally it's a blue state. Steve, can you comment on this? What are the problems with the jungle primary?
There's a lot of problems, Richard. One of which is what I see as voters cast their ballots. Today, in our current system, is if there is a number of candidates that they have to choose from, they will skip that whole entire question and undervote that ballot. And I could definitely see that happening. So when you start looking at the voter turnout and look at the statistics with a jungle primary, is, for example, we're at a 40% turnout, which is not good, but pretty much most counties are the same. We will go down quite a bit where a lot of individuals will no longer participate. It's very confusing. And a lot of individuals will just sit there and say, I have no idea who these individuals are. What is their party affiliation? What do they stand for? What is going on here? But when you start allowing a Democrat to vote into the Republican primary or a Republican voting into a Democrat primary, the example I like to share is like if you live in an HOA and your HOA board comes and says, hey, we are raising our yearly dues by $1,000. So that's going to be sitting there adding up, a check due to them each and every year. But we're going to allow the other neighborhood across the street to vote on this. And so that is what's happening, is then you have people outside your neighborhood that are going to sit there and participate in that if you're going to end up paying an additional $1,000 a year in dues. To me, is the Republican primary should be the Republican primary, and the Democrat primary should be the Democrat primary. The way it's always been, I'm a firm believer, one person, one vote. And that's just the way it should be in the primary and also in a general election.
Right. Well, Candice, in this jungle primary system, so right now in Colorado, we allow third-party candidates and unaffiliated candidates who gather enough signatures to actually go on the general. They don't even go through a primary system. In this thing, though, they have to go on this initial primary ballot along with all the party candidates. Are they really, will they really have any realistic shot of making the general election ballot?
Well, they actually have as good a chance as any of the others.
Yep.
Because it's a level playing field among all of them. But there'll be no distinction for the minority. The minority parties are solidly against the whole concept because they realize that doing away with the party system does away with them as well.
Right.
Because, but anyway, at the primary level, they're just like all the other cats and dogs.
Right.
And we are fighting for distinction among ourselves at this level, and we're going to lose that distinction without the benefit of the assembly to rank order our candidates. But really something that I'm more concerned is what Steve touched on earlier. It's what type of candidate ends up on this primary ballot. You're going to get a kind of a uniparty, hive mind type candidate that either has the money to access the ballot or is willing to take somebody else's money to get onto the ballot. So what's happening is that the fringe voices, and I'm sorry, as a grassroots candidate, I'm one of the fringe voices that they're trying to eliminate.
But, okay, so this jungle primary, it favors, it gives an advantage to dark money, right? To that money that is not tracked or reported, and we don't know exactly where it's coming from. Why is that so? Why is that true?
So one of the things is if you petition on, and there's a number of candidates that did that down in El Paso County for our June 25th primary. And they sat there and spent $20,000 to $30,000 to get the necessary signatures to get on the primary ballot. And Richard, I will share with you is, as the clerk and recorder, some of those petitions I have turned over to the district attorney for fraud. And so they're being investigated, and there is an open investigation in El Paso County right now. And here's what's happening, is because when you have a large number of candidates that are trying to petition onto a primary ballot, there's only so many circulators out there. So what happens is then they sit there and they reach out to these out-of-town circulators who are frauding the campaigns and the candidates. So that is where I'm working with the district attorney. So some of these organizations that come from out of town are actually frauding these candidates and not getting the proper signatures and taking the $20,000.
Okay, so we're talking about, right now, folks, we're talking about a jungle primary system where every candidate goes on the ballot, on one ballot. You don't have Democrat ballot and Republican ballot. You have one ballot. You could have dozens of candidates. And they arbitrarily will send 4 to the general election. Why 4? No one knows. But they use the top 4 vote getters in the jungle primary. But now we're going to shift and we're going to talk about what happens at the general election. And so right now, I want to just I think what we need to do right now is we probably need to take a break. We're going to take a 90-second break, share some information. When we come back, we're going to talk about ranked choice voting, the proposed system from the left for our general elections, and why this would be a complete disaster and a threat to democracy. So let's take our break right now, and we'll be right back after these announcements. Hey everybody, this is Richard Harris, Executive Director of Truth and Liberty. Recently we had our 2nd annual awards banquet. I'm telling you, it was an awesome event. And this year we had many corporate and individual sponsors. Andrew Womack and I want to say thank you personally to each and every one of you who sponsored the event. We want to acknowledge your support. You know, our sponsors make it possible for us here at Truth and Liberty to educate, unify, and mobilize believers in Jesus Christ to affect the reformation of nations through the 7 mountains of cultural influence. And so to all of you, we just want you to know that your generous support helps us not only to proclaim the truth through our Truth and Liberty show, but also to continue offering biblical resources on our website, like the Pastor's Toolkit for Cultural Engagement. Also presenting powerful conferences every year where we're able to equip believers to be light and salt in their communities, and so much more. So God bless you. Thank you again for supporting Truth and Liberty.
I'd like to invite you to join me for one of our premier events during the whole year. That's our Summer Family Bible Conference. We have things for the youth. I tell you, they've taken the youth ministry to a whole new level. It is spectacular. We have musicals, we have teaching of the Word. It's going to be July the 1st through the 5th. And we have eating, barbecue, all kinds of things. It's just a whole family affair. July the 1st through the 5th, our Summer Family Bible Conference.
Okay, we're back here on Truth and Liberty. Thank you to all of you for watching today. Our first segment with our guest, Steve Schleiker and Candice. Candice, help me with your last name. Stutzriem, right? Okay. Sorry about that. But it's just complicated, difficult to follow. But I hope you got the gist of it, which is that the left, the liberals in Colorado right now are trying to push through. First thing is they want to create a jungle primary system in Colorado where every candidate goes on the primary ballot and they send only the top 4 vote getters to the general. Well, you know, Colorado is now considered a deep blue state, right? So what are the odds, generally speaking, in this state that Democrats are going to be the top 4 vote getters on these jungle primary system, and they're going to be eliminating Republicans from the process?
Yep.
That's my take on it. But I want to reserve the rest of our time to talk about the next threat, which is called ranked choice voting. And before we get into questions with Steve and Candice here, I want to show you a little video that we pulled down off of YouTube that provides a nice little primer on this subject so that we don't all get confused here. All right, so if we're ready, let's go ahead and play that video.
We're going to show you an example of how ranked choice voting could actually determine a winner of an election. In this election, there are several candidates: Janice, Emily, Steve, Joe, Patrice, and Frank. In a Memphis ranked choice voting election, voters get 3 candidate choices. They choose their first pick, second, and so on. In this election, there were 40 votes for Janice, who is in first place, 20 votes for Emily in second place, 18 votes for Steve for third place, 11 votes for Joe, 7 votes for Patrice, and 4 votes for Frank. In this example, there are 100 voters, so 51 votes is needed for a majority win. In a traditional election, the type that has been used for decades, if no one got a majority of the votes, there would be a runoff between the 2 top vote getters, in this case, Janice and Emily. Voters would have the opportunity to listen to these 2 candidates and their positions and make a final choice in a traditional runoff election. That's how democracy works. But with ranked choice voting, it's not one person, one vote. In this case, people have 3 votes to choose their first, second, and third place choices. With ranked choice voting, an algorithm is used to determine the winner. Since Frank has the lowest number of votes, he is eliminated, and his votes go to the voter's second place vote. After election officials do a recount, Janice gets these votes, so she now has 44 votes. After the recount, Patrice is in last place, so she is eliminated. Sorry, Patrice. Election officials now do a recount to move her votes to her supporter's second choice, Frank. But because Frank was already eliminated, they moved to the third choice, Steve. Adding these third place votes to Steve, he now has 25 votes. Election officials do another recount and find that Joe is in last place and is eliminated. Election officials look to see what the second place votes were and they were for Frank, who has already been eliminated. So they looked to the third place, and that would be Patrice, but she was also eliminated. So where do these votes go? Essentially, they get thrown out, into the trash and not counted. These are called exhausted votes. The election officials do another recount and find Emily is in last place with 20 votes, and she is eliminated, and her second place votes go to Steve, so now he has 45 votes. Another recount shows Janice has the lowest number of votes and is eliminated, leaving Steve the winner in this ranked choice voting election. But how can that be? The winner needed 51 votes to get a majority, and Steve only got 45. He was third in the popular vote and would not have gone to the runoff in a traditional election, but with ranked choice voting, he won? And what about the 11 voters who had their ballots tossed in the trash and not counted? If you recall, the difference between Steve and Janice was just 1 vote. How would these 11 people vote if given the choice between Janice, who came in first place, and Steve, who came in third? These voters were disenfranchised with ranked choice voting.
All right, well, we're back after that video. I hope that you found that easy enough to follow. It is a complex system. And my question for our panel today, the first question I have is that a fair explanation of what is being proposed here in Colorado, what they're trying to do?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that is a really good video. And just to add a little example to that, Richard, is many of us remember voting in the presidential election in 2020, is if ranked choice voting were at the national level, Elizabeth Warren would have been on the ballot for to run for president.
Wow. Elizabeth Warren would have beaten Joe Biden in 2020, even though she was way down the list as far as the number of votes that
Absolutely.
she had gotten.
So you have a candidate who did not win a caucus, did not win a state primary. However, because she was an individual that just didn't create any conflict or anything like that, that she would have sat there in the ranked choice process, would have came out just like we just saw here.
Well, we have a real life example. You alluded to it earlier with Sarah Palin in the state of Alaska. This is not the presidential run she made where she was vice president, the nominee for vice president, when she ran for Congress, wasn't it, for their congressional seat?
In 22.
In 2022, I almost said 1922. 2022, what happened in that race? She was the top vote getter, but what happened?
Oh, I'd love to tell the story because it's so convoluted. Because of the jungle primary that we just discussed, 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat and probably a 4th candidate proceeded on to the general election. And it was known that during the campaign, the Democrat candidate, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, she was known to walk around holding both Sarah Palin and the other Republican candidates' posters. And she would say, you can vote for either one you choose, but just remember to vote for me for second. So in other words, she had the foresight to know she could game this system because she knew the 2 Republicans were loath to vote for each other, even for second place. So if they would be willing to vote for the Democrat for second place after the ranked choice voting, reassembly of all the ballots, she ended up prevailing as the winner.
So we literally, I've seen the list of candidates in that, and I thought there were like 40 candidates in that race. Am I right? And then
in the primary.
Oh,
probably.
in the primary. Well,
yes.
Okay, so in the general, Sarah Palin got like 40% of the vote, but the 4th place finisher actually won the election. Am I right on that?
Yes, and the key thing here is that one of the major goals of the ranked choice voting method is to achieve a majority vote. And we need to understand that in 250 years of American history in voting, 48 in Colorado, we've never had a majority rules voting system. It's always been he who has the most votes wins, a plurality system. This is a big change of philosophy, believing that you have to create a contrived majority in order to declare a winner. So that's exactly what's happening when you see this reshuffling. It's like a shell game of the remaining undervotes or votes beneath the first place choice. And this is what the result you end up with. You have the winner becomes the loser and the loser becomes the winner.
Wow, and just like in the illustration in the video we saw where the third place finisher ends up winning the whole election, this sounds like a crazy system. Has it been tried anywhere else besides Alaska?
You know, it has. It's been in a number of municipalities, a number of states, here in the United States. 85% of them that have voted it in are now, they have either done it or either this year repealing it. A lot of municipalities are doing the same thing, where Alaska this year has it on their ballot to repeal ranked choice voting. They have seen that it absolutely does not represent the voter. But Richard, what I'd like to capitalize on too, as a clerk and recorder, there were two things that were explained in that video, two words that really, really bothered me. One of which is reappropriation and also throwing away. Reappropriating votes from one candidate to another. Absolutely not. I don't like manipulation in databases. I don't like sitting there doing that. The other thing is when you're sitting there throwing away somebody's vote, you have just now basically said your voice does not matter. And I really have a really hard time with that.
Well, and fundamentally what we're doing in this ranked choice voting, so we said earlier in the first segment that their proposal here in Colorado is that they'll send 4 people to the general, right?
Yep.
And so this ranked choice voting says you have to vote for 4 people. You don't just vote for 1 now in the general. You have to identify 1 through 4 in some kind of preference idea, right?
That's what the rank.
I thought we believed in 1 person, 1 vote. Now we're talking 1 person, 4 votes,
Right.
Or maybe 1 vote and then half a vote and a third of a. I mean, mathematically, I don't know what you call that, but it's not 1 person, 1 vote, is it?
It is not. And as you know, the example I shared when we were talking about the jungle primary, I see it. Every election where, voters will sit there and say, school board is the example I shared, is vote for 4, school board members to fill the at-large seats. And many don't. They'll just vote for 1 person. But our current system allows that vote to be counted. That voter's voice is still heard. However, with this is if you don't vote for all 4 and rank them how you see fit, then your ballot would not count.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. So Candice, if I go into the polling station in this ranked choice voting system they're trying to put in place here in Colorado, and I see candidates 1 through 4, and I really have a problem, maybe even a conscientious objection to candidate number 3. And I skip him and I just put 1, 2, 3, and I don't put 1 through 4, then nothing counts. My ballot goes in the trash can?
That's correct. Well, that's called an undervote. If you refuse to vote for the person you absolutely loathe, so they'll trash that ballot. But also, when that was a top 6, the video that we saw, so we're top 4. It's not quite as confusing, but when you have so many bubbles and you're trying to rank order them, it's easy to add an extra bubble, which is called an overvote. Another
so
reason.
Undervoting and overvoting.
And then some people can't resist but signing their name on the ballot or making some comment. That's another reason to trash the ballot. So what'll often happen is that these trash ballots or exhausted ballots can exceed the margin of the victory in the actual race. And as it's set up now,
just like in the example.
Right? Yes,
He
exactly.
he ended up winning by 1 vote, but there were 11 ballots thrown away.
They were thrown away, but then what it's glossing over is what you talked about, the 1 person, 1 vote. That is law under the Warren Court since 1962, I believe it was, when that was enacted, and believe me, this was part of the discussion at the title board when these initiatives were running across the title board. One person, one vote was discussed, but not, I believe it should be challenged on a national level.
Well, so let's
the
think
entire
about
concept.
this. Let's think about this. One person, one vote. So they're assuming, if I rank 1 through 4, there's an assumption there that I want, let's say it's Jane Doe, John Smith, Tom Brown, and whoever else. Then I rank them like that. That I want Tom to be the winner, no matter who else he's facing. There's an assumption there. But we really don't think that way, do we, as human beings? I need to see candidate A versus candidate B, and then I choose between them.
That's right.
Because my vote might change depending upon who Tom is facing, right?
Yep.
And so what we have is we have bureaucrats or computers reassigning votes based on this assumption that is not necessarily true.
Yeah. You know, one thing that also has not been discussed, and something that I've always asked the question as well, is what about our write-in candidates? Where do they fit in this process? They too have a right where they can sit there and submit to the Secretary of State. They want to be a write-in candidate. But this type of system does not allow for that. So basically you're excluding a candidate that has the ability of doing write-in. And as you look on every ballot, is if they want to write in for a Democrat ballot or Republican ballot or even a minor party, but none of this discusses write-in candidates.
Wow. And so, Steve, you're county clerk and recorder. Let me ask you this. Is this system going to be more or less expensive for the taxpayers?
It's going to be a lot more expensive. And Richard, let me share why. One of which is, you know, Colorado has a system in place where we have the logic and accuracy test, an audit prior to the election. Then we have a risk limiting audit. Then we have canvass. Then we have election night reporting. This system right here eliminates all of the current audits that we do for an election process today. It also eliminates the election night reporting. So a system like this could delay reporting or find out who the winner is by weeks.
Why is that?
Well, as you're sitting here working and moving the votes, and as there's, you know, the video alluded to, is you're going back to another recount and another recount. And so one of which is this election that I just finished up, I'm estimating it costs the county taxpayers about $1.6 million. And that is paying for election judges, VSPCs, you know, just a number of things. But if you're continually doing recount and recount and recount, those are done by election judges that the taxpayers are paying to do that.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I think that it's important to make a distinction here, though, between what would be an actual runoff, which is what you were describing. The circumstances would change if we were to conduct an actual runoff. But there's another name for ranked choice voting that's often used called instant runoff. And it's not a true runoff, and that's what you were pointing out, because as you were saying, you're being forced to follow a set of rules that are very confusing, very ambiguous, and sometimes morally challenging, where some people are going to refuse to vote for the person they loathe. So in the end, it ends up disenfranchising certain pockets of voters, particularly people of a certain age who are resistant to learning a new way of voting. Like, don't tell me how to vote. I know what I'm doing. I know my man, and I'm going to vote for him when I get in there. So it's older people, it's people who are English as a second language, and typically minorities. Anyway, they found all this out in Alaska, which is a very good example of the result is that people lose interest. They are jaded by the entire voting process, and then in the end, what happens? They just end up quitting voting. They had a record lower voter turnout in Alaska, in just in the last month. ranked choice voting is now on the ballot to be repealed.
If people don't think their vote really counts, they're not going to bother, right?
right.
And isn't that the feeling you would get from this? Is I'm not really voting, and how do I know this? I'm going to be electing somebody. They're going to jimmy the numbers on the back end, and
it can't be repeated. It can't be recounted. It cannot be audited, no matter what they tell you.
Okay, so let's talk about that real quick. We're running low on time here in today's show, but they're going to do away with all audit and recount, and how can that be?
So basically what we would have to do is just revamp the whole entire process of how you go about auditing this type of election. So what we're accustomed to today would completely go away and have to be revamped. My job is to educate and also to count the votes. And one of the things is there are still a lot of questions, not only in the state of Colorado, but throughout our nation, about our current election system. And people want to sit there and they want to know the answers. And I feel it's my job to do that. But we sit there and now we're going to further confuse this process with ranked choice voting, as I feel many voters are going to be disenfranchised. If I could piggyback off what you said, this is a quote, and it really hit home. Ranked choice voting is not beneficial to minorities. It's voter suppression, and that was from Hazel Dukes of the NAACP.
Wow.
So, that is just one thing where Candice was absolutely correct in her statement. But
just one.
Just one. I heard that too.
I give it to you, just one.
Thank you, Steve. I'll take it.
But it is. It's very confusing, and I feel is we as clerk and recorders, we as elected officials, we should be out there explaining what we currently do. But going to this is going to further divide our country.
And Steve, just to be clear, these ballots with 4 different votes on it are all going to be tabulated by computers.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
And so do you think that's going to increase or decrease public confidence in the outcome?
It will most certainly decrease.
Yeah, we've got people right now, millions of Americans don't trust the system. And how can this possibly increase confidence in the outcome? I can't imagine that. Well, so praise God, we've got people like Candice and others who are fighting against this and doing something to stop this. So Candice, you've got some ballot initiatives of your own. I'm not saying they're yours, but I mean, some good Coloradans have seen this danger coming and have drafted some ballot initiatives that are now you're in the signature gathering stage. Can you tell us about this and what are they?
Thank you for letting us talk about it. I have to tell the story of my friend and I. Her name is Linda Bissett. We realized in January of this year that Mr. Thiry had indeed come forward with these ballot initiatives that he was starting to pass through the title board. And we began attending the title board sessions trying to stop the momentum of what this vast operation he was putting forth. And then we realized it really came from the Lord, that we had to do this ourselves. And we found this clever little brochure, How to File a Ballot Initiative. This is called Citizen Ballot Initiatives. It's like the last piece of democracy that people have in order to affect our legislature or our Constitution as a single citizen. So we wrote 3 ballot initiatives. All 3 of them passed through the title board, and they are now petitions.
Okay, so tell us what they are real quick.
Okay, the first one is number 202, and that initiative is designed to preserve the caucus and assembly system as a pathway onto the primary ballot, in addition to the petition system.
Okay.
And
202 preserves caucus and assembly. What's next?
Yes, sir. And then the next one is 278, and it tries to undo the jungle primary by retaining the way we do business right now, guaranteeing 2 partisan primary ballots.
Okay. And what's the next one?
And then the last one is the crown jewel, 201, is to simply ban ranked choice voting.
All right, folks. So you heard it, Coloradans. Listen up now. Take notes. Petition 201, 202, 278. These are good. sign these and vote for them once they're on the ballot in November. Everything else, as far as all this stuff goes, vote against. These are the three that you need: 201, 202, and 278. Now, we've just got a little bit of time left, Candice. Where can people go to learn more information?
They can go to our website. Our website is www.coloradocounts.com.
All right, coloradocounts.com. Let's put that up so everybody can see that. And you can learn more about this bizarre thing they're trying to do here in Colorado. Where can people go to sign the petitions for 201, 202, and 278 to get them on the ballot?
It's all on there. It's one-stop shopping.
Okay.
You can get yourself smarter on this than you've already had a chance.
But you can't sign online. You got to find a petition. So where do they do it?
There is an events calendar on the website where you can find events where the circulators will be there, happy to take your signature.
Awesome.
You can
Go
contact
to,
us.
I'm sorry, we're almost out of time. Go to coloradocounts.com, look at the events page, and you can find where petitions are located. You can sign them. Do you need volunteers to help circulate?
We need volunteers to circulate.
Can they volunteer on the website?
They can volunteer on the website, and they can donate there too.
Okay,
also.
don't forget donating.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I only have 15 seconds left.
I had to get that
Guys,
in.
thanks so much for watching today. I told you were going to get an education. Don't forget also the website for the El Paso County Clerk and Recorder, Steve Schleiker. We can flash that up. Sorry, we're out of time today, folks. God bless you all. We look forward to seeing you again next time on Truth and Liberty.
Thank you for joining today's Truth and Liberty livecast. You can watch today's and past livecasts in our archives at truthandliberty.net. Our goal is to educate Christians and connect them with resources and organizations to help them impact their sphere of influence. You can help us accomplish this by making a donation at truthandliberty.net/donate. Join us next time for more Truth and Liberty.